first weekly edition of SuperSam's top basketball games to watch for the ANEC area. My name is Sam Frick. I'm the founder and editor at ANEC Sports, covering schools across Northeast Indiana, Elkhart County, and the good folks down in Marion, Indiana. And so, girls basketball season gets underway this week. You will see an interview with Lenny Krebs of Warsaw in the first episode of Courtside Ballers. Each week we'll have a show of Courtside Ballers to recap what took place in the basketball scene, any commentary that went on during the basketball season, and then some interviews along the way. And then in addition to that, we'll have a separate segment which actually talks about some of the top games we're going to be looking at each week for our ANEC area here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give myself, 12 minutes. I'm going to give myself 12 minutes to talk about some of the top games in the ANEC area. And then once those 12 minutes are done, that's the end of the show. That's just a great way to keep it short, simple, and to the point. All right? And the 12 minutes starts now. So let's go ahead and tip things off with Tuesday. Eventually I'll get used to saying tip instead of kick. But anyway, on Tuesday nights, first games begin here. We have Bremen at Argos. That's a pretty interesting first game of the season for the Bremen Lions, a team that had a great season last year. For Bremen, they do bring back some solid kids back on that team. They were 24-3 last year, where the Bremen Lady Lions, they bring back Eliana Grubbs on that team. They do have to replace Kyla Foster from last season, but they still bring back a pretty solid core of their own with the Bremen Lions. Kate Kincaid's a sophomore. Emma Kincaid's a senior. Eliana Grubbs, right? Tatum Feathers, 6'2" junior. Skyly Feathers, 6' sophomore. So they're big in the paint as well. And that's going to be key here because Argos primarily is a team that likes to attack the rim and whatnot. And the Argos Dragons, not the best season, 7-16 record for them, but I would say a pretty decent team in the Hoosier North Athletic Conference. One player I do like from Argos that's coming back this season is Ellie Ballenbacher, really good two-sport athlete for Argos. Capped off a nice soccer career at Argos as a defender. She's their power forward. She averaged 10 points per game, shooting 38% from the floor. She averages 7.6 rebounds per game, 1.3 steals. So really nice senior. I'm a big fan of Ballenbacher's post game for Argos. Not the best team in the universe, but I would say for a first game of the season, that's a pretty good first test for the Bremen Lions, an old rival back in the good old days and whatnot. And so Bremen won this game convincingly last year by 40 points. It may not be quite a 40-point win for Bremen, but I would say that's a game you look at and say that's a pretty decent game there on paper. Concord and Angola. Now, if you want to talk about a team that's looking to throw the sophomores out into the wild here, Angola hosting Concord for your first game of the season is definitely going to be an interesting matchup for the Angola Hornets against the Minutemen. These two met last season back on December 18th, with Angola winning 47-43. I would say this is definitely a different game this year for Angola compared to what we have seen, or this is a different team from Angola compared to what we've seen in the past, but it's a very talented Angola team that's going to be tested at home against a pretty scrappy Concord team. They were 9-13 last season. They do bring back a nice group of juniors and seniors. Shelby Emmerich, right? Shiloh Smith, their point guard. They got both Emmerich and Smith are point guards. Let's see here. They do have to replace some seniors at Concord as well. But, I mean, it's a pretty scrappy team. You would expect that from them. They do play a lot of juniors at Concord. I'm curious to see what the Minutemen have up their sleeve. They typically are a pretty battle-tested team here. So, Brandon Abel's Concord squad, definitely a good first test for the Hornets as they bring in a bunch of young kids coming in, looking to see what that young talent could do. This could be a very interesting first game of the year for the Angola Hornets. Fairfield and Elkhart, the Falcons and the Lions meet for the second time ever, since obviously Elkhart's only been at school since 2020. These two met last season with Fairfield winning 40-39, right around that same time last season. And Fairfield, we've talked about them in our first episode, so I'm not going to go in depth here at all. Just go back to the episode and you'll know more about Fairfield. As far as Elkhart goes, we'll talk more about them in a later episode. But Ken Hunt's group last season, they were a 14-11 team. They were without Shania Stout for for most of that team that season last year. And they bring back some nice juniors here. Nia Bonner, Jordan Johnson is on that team. They got Trent Harris, Aaliyah Martinez, Taylor Higgins. Obviously, Shania Stout is a senior. I've liked Shania Stout since she was like a freshman. So obviously, it's a talented Elkhart team. They're going to be an athletic team. They're going to have some size. It's going to create some challenges for Fairfield. Great first test for both teams in that aspect of things. Fremont and South Bend St. Joe. St. Joe's usually a pretty battle-tested team, although they've had some struggles in recent years. But either way, I think it's a good first test for Fremont going to South Bend, a long bus ride for Fremont to open the season against a pretty decent St. Joe squad. And let's see here. I want to get to Warsaw Snyder here. Northfield, Southern Wells. I think the Norse will be favored in that game. I'm going to get to Warsaw real quick if I can. Warsaw at Snyder. If you listen to Lenny Krebs, the interview with Lenny Krebs, he talks a lot about Warsaw and Snyder, so I'm going to go pretty quick here. I expect this to be a fun game. He talked a lot about Janiah Cooper, great player for the Snyder Panthers. Probably going to be a high Division I commit eventually for the coming out of Snyder High School. This should be a fun matchup between a very good Warsaw team that's going to go through an adjustment period and a Snyder team that returns a lot. And I think they gain some talent as well. So Snyder's going to be one of the top teams in the SAC. This could be one of those close games. Last year, it was a 31-point win for Warsaw. I'm not expecting that this time around. This is definitely going to be a much closer game. I'm looking around 10 points at most in this game. I'm expecting this to be a much more competitive game this time around. We take a look at Wednesday. Do we have any games that come to mind for Wednesday? I'm going to pause for just a minute here. Interesting game between Woodland and Garrett. I talked a lot about Garrett here, but Woodland, they bring back a pretty decent group led by Alyssa Anderson, but I do have a question with Woodland. It's going to be, where's that scoring going to come from beyond Alyssa Anderson? That is a little bit concerning. But I mean, they got a pretty decent group with Woodland back, and I think one player that I think could be a key addition on that Woodland team is going to be Lexi Peoples for Woodland. She could be a player that could be a big help for the Warriors. I still like Woodland in this matchup, but I will say this, it's probably going to be a close game at Garrett, at Paul Bateman Gymnasium, tough place to play. But can they stop Alyssa Anderson? I think that's going to be the challenge with the Garrett Railroaders playing Woodland. One of our ANEC games of the week will come on Thursday. Concordia will be traveling to Eastside to take on the Blazers. You got Living Bollinger of the Cadets going up to Butler to take on the Eastside Blazers. Eastside's won both meetings so far in the series, and Eastside won this one by 21 points last season, 71-50. Really, Eastside has kind of dominated the series so far against the Concordia Cadets, but I do wonder if maybe this is the year that Concordia makes this a ball game with Eastside, knowing that Living Bollinger is the talent that she is. She is going to Purdue Fort Wayne next year, but can they get some scoring help beyond her? I think that's a question mark for Concordia going into the season. That will be obviously a key question for the Cadets, but Eastside, we've talked a lot about Eastside in our first episode, so I'll just lure you back to the episode if you want to learn more about Eastside. Them being home does matter a bit. I like Eastside, but I think this is going to be a closer game. I'm going to go around 14, 12 points in favor of the Blazers in that game, but Concordia, with the potential they have with Living Bollinger, you can't fully rule out the Cadets pulling up an upset in this one, with this being the first home game of the season and whatnot. Another interesting matchup on Thursday night will be Mississinawa and Northfield. These two met last year in a 48-43 Ole Miss win. Mississinawa, some people think they might be in the midst for the CIC championship. We'll talk about the Central Indiana Conference in a later episode. Northfield, brand new head coach, and Matt Hines, a longtime head coach at Eastbrook and Huntington North. Matt Hines now comes to Northfield with some nice returnees, but also a pretty decent freshman class coming into Northfield. Should be an interesting matchup down to Wabash. I think the Norse might be the better team on paper, but this is going to be a coin toss between these two Swans. Northfield's going to be a pretty interesting team in the Three Rivers Conference this year. We'll talk a little bit more about Northfield in a separate episode here. North Judson at Rochester. You got Whitney Combs coming in her third year at North Judson. Joe Burrs coming into his fourth season at Rochester. Pretty nice matchup on paper there. Rochester won this game 46-43 last year. Rochester has won 14 of the last 26 meetings against the North Judson Blue Jays. So expect this one to be a gritty, physical game between these two squads in Fulton County. Let's see here. Northwestern and Tippy Valley. Valley won this game by 8 last year, 46-38. Although I will say Valley's probably going to be a little bit of a bigger favorite in this contest. I like the Vikings in this one. Quickly, I want to shift over to some of the Friday, Saturday games. Bluffton, Norwell, they meet for the first time in nearly 20 years. These are two powerful squads in the West Wells County area. Norwell has owned this series in its history, but it's a good first test for Bluffton, get them ready for the regular season. I like Norwell big, but this could be an entertaining game early on between the Tigers and the Knights to get them ready for the season. One game that could be a sneaky contest in Angola would be Wayne and Angola, although actually I need to correct myself. These two will actually meet on Saturday at noon because of Angola playing the football game against the Garrett Railroaders. So Wayne and Angola will actually meet on Saturday at noon. Either way, I think this is a game where either team could pull off the win. These two have never met before, at least not in recent memory. I could see Wayne pull off the win in this one, but this is going to be one of the more entertaining matchups as Lawyer Smith III makes his coaching debut at Wayne against the Angola Hornets. So Angola's going to get some interesting matchups right off the hop. All right, we're near the 2-minute drill, so let's get to Saturday matchups. Carroll at Columbia City. Carroll has owned the series, but in recent years, Columbia City has won this matchup in the recent memory. Although Columbia City looking quite a bit different this year. No Addy Baxter this time around. Addy Baxter's now a Butler. So the post-Addy Baxter era begins at Columbia City. They host Carroll. Some really good matchup, good talent between these two teams. Lily George of Carroll, Ava Myers, Kayla Hafner of the Carroll Chargers. Got Tora Holler, Sola Holler, Anissa Tonkel, Claudia Strack, Izzy Knitter, Columbia City. They got some freshmen that they think that could make an impact for the Eagles. Really going to be a fun matchup at the Eagles at the cage in Columbia City. I almost said the Eagles nest, but it's the cage in Columbia City. I like the Eagles in that one. Chesterton and Northridge, an interesting matchup at Northridge, but I think the Raiders will be favored there. Let's quickly go down here and want to make this quickly here. East Snowball, Westview, the Knights, I think are going to be favored in that one. Elkhart Christian Concord could be an interesting matchup, but I think Concord will still be favored there. And I'm going to stop the clock for a minute so I can get to my next key game to watch here. Okay, here. Where's our next one here? John Glenn at Fairfield. Glenn won by 23 last year. I think this one's going to be a much closer game this time around at Fairfield between Glenn and Fairfield, two old rivals in Northern States Conference back in the 70s. And then lastly, without a minute to go here, we have the game of the week. The game of the week on Saturday. Then it's the Norwell Knights at the Warsaw Tigers. Norwell won the 3A state championship last year. They come in as a 4A team, defending state champions. Warsaw went to state in 4A last year. They fell to Lawrence North. They're going to honor that team that went to state for Warsaw. One of the top matchups in all of Indiana this week. The Norwell Knights and their 1-3-1 defense and Vanessa Rossworm against Brooke Zartman, Jocelyn Bricker, Lexus Neely of the Warsaw Tigers. It's been a competitive series the last 25 years, 6-5 in favor of Norwell, but Warsaw dominated the series last year 74-50 when Brooke Zartman had nearly 30 points and in that contest. I don't think it's going to be quite a blowout this time around. I expect this to be a much more competitive game. Really, it's going to come down to Warsaw being able to adapt early in the season against a really talented Norwell squad. And you can hear my alarm on the background here, so that means time's up. And that's our first edition of Super Sam's top basketball games to watch in the ANEC area. Tune in next week where I will go through the schedule again and talk about my thoughts on some top games that you should have your eyes on each week. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on our ANEC YouTube page so you can follow on our basketball coverage all season long, whether if it's the Courtside Ballers podcast or if it's this segment here where we talk about the top games that are going to be going on each week. Also, if you're looking for other content for football and volleyball, we're going to have another episode to preview the state finals for girls volleyball, and then we will have a podcast later this week to preview the sectional championship games taking place across the ANEC area. So, for my name is Sam Frick, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.